Alright, what I want to go over is the distance formula. The distance between 2 points, and the first point I have highlighted in blue, but this is what we'll just say is point 1. That's what the little subscripts mean. This is the x value for point 1, this is the y value for point 1. And here in red is point 2. So what we're doing is, we're finding the distance between 2 points, point 1 and point 2. Point 1 is in blue, point 2 is in red. And this is our formula. D equals the square root of the square of the difference of the x values plus the square of the difference in the y values. And in your book, I'm not going over it in this video, is where the distance formula comes from is the Pythagorean theorem. Remember that whenever you're dealing with right triangles? And C is the hypotenuse. You could take the square of A and the square of B, and that would give you C. And this is where this comes from. So let's work a problem to be able to talk about it and articulate it. So the first thing that I will use colors like I did up here, so that way you can more readily see where everything's going. So point 1 for what I'm looking at is going to be -3, 4, and point 2 will be 2, -3. Doesn't matter, it's arbitrary which one you select to be point 1 and point 2. Alright, so one thing that helps me, because I can get my numbers jumbled up, my mind and my eyes don't communicate clearly sometimes. So what I can turn around and do is make sure I write what those are. So since this is point 1, this is x sub 1, and that's y sub 1, and this is x sub 2, and this is y sub 2. So what I'm going to have here, I'll go ahead and write these out. Okay. So I have x sub 2, x sub 2, so that's 2, minus x sub 1, there's x sub 1, and -3. I'm going to put parentheses around that. And then I have my y sub 2 is a -3. Again, I'll put parentheses around that. Make sure I realize that there is a negative sign with it. Anything to help me be able to visualize. Y sub 1, there's 4. So that's how my points break down in there. Okay. Now let's simplify what we have under the radical, just dealing with our signs. A negative and a negative that are next to each other become a positive. I can view that as a -1 outside the parentheses, so a negative times a negative is a positive. So what I end up with, and I'm just going to use my black marker, 2 plus 3 squared, 2 plus 3 squared plus, and that's a -3 minus 7 squared. Okay, solve inside the parentheses and then square. So D equals, I have 2 plus 3 is 5. 5 squared is 25. Plus, I have a -3 minus 4, or how this can be viewed as a -3 plus a -4. So I have a -7 squared. And -7 squared is 49. What I have is D equals the square root of 49 plus 25, 74. This is a precise answer. The square root of 74. I can't turn around and I can turn around and write it as decimal, but This is the distance. Let's look at that as a decimal value, because just being able to look at a value and saying, okay, the square root of 74 is this. I know the square root of 81 is 9, so it's going to be less than 9. So calculator out, square root of 74 is 8.60. So that's what we'll write it as. My distance is equal to 8.60. That is the distance. Now, with this, what it is the distance between 2 points, but it's not a vertical line or a horizontal line. We dealt with distance in 5th and 6th grade on a number line. For instance, if I had this right here, and let's say I had a -3, 0, and let's say 4, and I wanted to find the distance between these two. I wanted to find the distance from here to here. Well, to find the distance is just the difference of your larger number from the smaller. So it would be 4 minus a -3. And that turns into 4 plus 3, which equals 7. And if I were to actually look at that, there's a -2, -1, 0, 1, 2, 3. So if I counted all of these, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's my distance. The problem with it is what we're using. We're not just using a single axis or single axis. We're using both of them. So our points could be something like this. So we just can't count over. This is kind of where the Pythagorean theorem comes in, is that what we're looking at is determining this. This is the difference in my x's, x sub 2 minus x sub 1, and this is the difference in the y's, y sub 2 minus y sub 1. And what we do is we square and take this square root of. Squaring prevents negative numbers. Okay guys, for the distance formula between 2 points, you need to know the formula. I recommend writing out your y sub 1 and your x sub 1 and your y sub 2 and your x sub 2 to make sure that you plug the correct number into the formula where it goes. And then you're left with your basic mathematical operations, adding and subtracting of integers, performing squares, and then taking a square root. Good luck with your homework.